Welcome to Nonprofit Insider. I'm pleased to be hosting a show with executive directors and key people of local nonprofits. I've worked in the nonprofit world for over 30 years, and in those years I've realized that the majority of our community does not know about the organizations that provide critical services we sometimes take for granted. Most times they only hear about these important groups when they get a letter in the mail asking them for money. This is a chance to hear about the organizations that touch so many in our community. The opinions expressed in Nonprofit Insider are not necessarily those of WMPG, its staff and underwriters, or USM. Today we have Michelle Surdoval. Did I pronounce it right?
You did.
All right. Of the York Community Service Association. I was having a real hard time with your name. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I've been practicing. So, what is the York Community Service Association?
So, York Community Service Association, which is called YCSA, is a small nonprofit down in York that's serving York residents. And York is comprised of York Harbor, York Village, York Beach, and Cape Nettic. Those are all the 4 townships that make up the town of York.
Okay.
So residency is an issue for people that we serve.
What do you mean residency is an issue?
A lot of people think that nonprofits down in the southern part of Maine are serving the whole county. So we make a distinction about this is York residents taking care of other York residents. So
it's not York County, it's the town of York.
It's the town of York,
okay.
And those 4 townships that make up the whole town of York.
And how many people do you think that encompasses?
How many people are we serving, or what's
the general population, and then how many people are you serving?
Yeah, about 12,000, and then I think it almost doubles in the summer.
Right.
So we're serving, we have, so what is YCSA? It's a small nonprofit that's doing we sort of have 3 branches. One is we have a thrift store that is one of our funding sources, which is really why I took this position about 10 months ago, because I love this social entrepreneur model where you're not dependent upon grants exclusively for your funding. Gives us a little bit of flexibility and I hope sustainability over time, although this organization's been around for 50 years, so it has a long-standing history in the community. We have a food pantry that's serving about 60 families a week on the average.
Okay.
And then we have a family service program, which functions similarly to the general assistance offices that are around the state that are funded through DHHS and the town itself. So we're kind of picking up the gap of what may not get supported through a general assistance office. And then we're offering case management as well, which is a new service for us.
So when you talk about the food pantry, is that Meals on Wheels or just people come in and pick up food, or how does that work?
Yeah, people come in and pick up food. And I have to tell you, Dave, it's one of the new parts of this job for me is to really enter into what they call food sustainability or just feeding the hungry in Maine. It's been part of my work in the past around equity, but not as specific as what it's like to really run a food pantry. And
so you're seeing the trenches, you're seeing the people who are actually affected by this that we all hear about on the radio and television.
Absolutely. And it's in York because it's perceived as a very affluent community, and of course it is. But there is a level of poverty in this community that's really quite interesting to watch. Watch the invisibility of poverty in York is very interesting.
I know there's confidentiality issues as a social worker myself, so maybe you could share with the listeners a story of somebody, without losing or maintaining the confidentiality so people understand what this really means.
So we're seeing a new client for us is a woman who's just turned 62 to 65 that's had a job and a career before, and now they're living on a fixed income for the first time in their life. And very often they maybe have lost a partnership, so there was some shared resources in the past, and now they're needing to create a life on a minimum fixed income. And they're needing a food pantry as a resource. And for that woman in particular, it's been women coming through our doors, that's a really difficult point in their life. So where they don't want to go to the food pantry, they don't want to ask for support like this, but they're really needing to. So we're very often, our food pantry's open 1 day a week. Some pantries are open once a month, couple of days a week, depends on the population. So we tend to open the pantry privately for people who are needing that service for the first time, because there's so much shame and stigma about needing that kind of support. So we're trying to be really sensitive to somebody who's needing help for the first time in their life.
I've been around food pantries for a good portion of my career, but I've never heard of that concept where you do a private entree into the system so people get a comfort level.
Yeah, it's been, if we don't do that, we're feeling like people are going hungry, because to get over what it takes to walk into an agency like us it's a process.
So you've only been there about 10 months, if I heard correctly,
Yeah.
but do you feel that there's people whose pride are getting in the way of actually going to the pantry and picking up food and basic essentials?
I think so. I think one of the things we're trying to really work on as an organization is to continually make this a point of entry in someone's life with a safe group of people around, to be treated with as much pride and dignity and empathy as we can muster as people who are serving clients who have been in this cycle of poverty for a really long time, but it always feels terrible to be asking, and then for this new client who's needing help and support for the first time in their life. We're trying to. Somebody said to me, I had an older man that came in and who's, been in and out of our office over time, a couple of times a year, needing help with their fuel assistance, or got behind on rent because they were doing contract work and they lost jobs or whatever. And, he said, I left my pride at home a long time ago. And I said to him, well, I know what it takes to walk through this door. I've been a mom on welfare in WIC when I was a young single mother, so I can remember what that felt like with my food stamps at the counter at the grocery store. But I said, but I don't want you to leave without feeling like your pride and dignity is a little bit restored. Like, how can we make this? Our goal is to make this as comfortable as an experience as we can, even though it's a very difficult time in someone's life.
So you take food stamps and all the welfare pieces that people are talking about?
We're not helping distribute that. That's another mechanism.
They purchase from.
No, there's no purchasing at the food pantry. The food pantry is free.
Okay.
So they just come and take food.
Okay.
We're just changing the model. It's very interesting to see what's going on in the food pantry world around the country, because people, I think originally food pantries were sort of emergency points of contact for people, and now I think pantries are seeing that it really is a standard part of someone's budget to be able to supplement their income with food from a pantry so that they have money to pay some of their other fixed costs. And so we see people coming to the pantry every week as a way of getting food.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. And I know what your number one priority would be when I ask you the question as a nonprofit executive, what is the most difficult thing you have to face? And usually they say funding, so let's not talk about that right now. But as a nonprofit executive, what do you see some of the issues and some of the challenges that you're facing in running an organization like you are?
Well, I think with your Community Service Association specifically, one part that's been very interesting is that it's an organization that's been around for 50 years, but they've never had an executive director before. It's been run by a volunteer board. So if anybody was looking to do a master's thesis on organizational development, this would be an interesting organization to look at, because to come into an organization that has a history and a culture and then to create this executive director role has been really fascinating.
I'm sure.
I think, when thinking about what's hard, none of it feels hard. It's not the word that I would use to describe it.
I didn't use the word hard. I said what challenges.
Okay, challenges. It doesn't even feel like that's the word I would use.
Then what word would you use?
Well, it all lives in this place of fun. It's fun to me. And they're solvable problems. So it does. I suppose I could come up with a list of challenges. Like if you put a bunch of exec directors in the room, they probably, and you're right, funding would probably be up on the list. But thinking about it, driving up, I'm like, well, that doesn't even feel hard. That's going to happen or it's not going to happen. Like you work to make it happen, to keep your organization going.
Right.
And for me, the biggest issue is really looking at sustainability and what does that mean? And it's become a bit of a theme for the organization. It's the organization's sustainability that's really critical, but it's also part of the mission is to help clients create a life that is sustainable for them. Our goal is to not have people circle back.
Right.
What can we do to really do an intervention of whatever kind? What questions do we need to ask? What services do people need that they don't even know that they would be eligible for or don't know they could have access to?
So you haven't come up with any real challenges because you're still in your honeymoon period. What do you think the greatest asset is of the organization?
I think the greatest asset is just being there. That just to have a place in this really interesting community to walk into is that sometimes it's just somebody to talk to. Sometimes it's really, I'm homeless and I don't know where to go. So I think just being there is the greatest asset for me, that people have a place to go.
Okay. As I said to you when you walked in the door today, I'm going to give you a trivia question.
Okay.
You have no idea what this question is. Only one person has gotten it correct since we started the show, so maybe you'll be number 2. I doubt it, though. All right. What happened in York, Maine in 1623?
Oh, yeah, not going to get that one.
Not even going to give it a shot?
I'm not even giving it a shot.
Well, let's take a minute to think about it as we go to break.
I'm trying to learn the history of the last 2 years, so I haven't gone back that far yet.
Come on, 1623, that should be at the tip of your tongue. This is WMPG and Nonprofit Insider. My name is David Unger, and today we're talking to, and I'm going to mispronounce the name again. I'm going to get this right. Michelle Surdoval.
That's it.
Okay.
It's close.
Close. So
Surdoval.
Okay. I told her from the get-go that I have problems with last names. So, trivia question.
No, I really have no idea. I can't even fake that one.
Okay. Give it something.
No, there's nothing.
The nation's first sawmill was established near York.
Oh, yeah, I knew that. No. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
But that's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, that's information that will help you at your board meeting.
There's a funding stream there someplace.
Somewhere. Let's go back and talk about your assets. I do have some familiarity with the organization, and I've been down there. It's a great place. Talk to me about your volunteers.
Before I even do that, can I talk about my team? Because that is
also
another extraordinary asset.
I want to talk about your volunteers first.
My volunteers.
This is my show.
Okay. I didn't get that memo, but that's okay. We've had volunteers who have been with the organization for almost 30 years. I mean, we have some very extraordinary history with our volunteer base. And at the same time, we have new volunteers coming in every week. So they're critical to this organization, the volunteers.
How many volunteers do you think you have on it?
We have about 40 that are part of the food pantry, and then we have probably about 20, 25 who are rotating in and out of the thrift store. So those are the two places that we use volunteers the most. And then our board's an all-volunteer board, of course. So
then about how many hours per month, per week does a volunteer?
Well, the food pantry volunteer model is really very interesting. I haven't heard other people doing it this way, but we have 4 teams of volunteers that work 1 day a month. The pantry's open 1 day a week. So there's a different team that rotates, which is it's really interesting. And people start early in the morning, and we just opened into the evening for the first time. So we have volunteers that can be there from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. Or people that just do different shifts. And the thrift store, we have volunteers. Our thrift store manager, Donald Martin, will say to somebody 1 hour a month, 1 hour a week, 1 hour a day, whatever people can do. So we have people rotating in and out. A couple hours a day, usually volunteers come in.
Do you find that sometimes, and I've seen this in other organizations, where the recipients themselves begin to volunteer?
Well, we've just started to talk about that because it's been part of the culture to not have people volunteering that are perceived as clients. And I'm starting to question that as a group. We're starting to question that as a group, because clients are asking, can we volunteer?
Right.
Because they're wanting to give back and they're wanting to say thank you. And so that discussion's just started. I'd like to shift that a little bit.
There are some models that it's worked really successfully, and I've also seen where they've been able to nurture volunteers into donors themselves, because that's your best donor base in some instances, because they know the agency backwards and forwards.
Right. We have a family that we've been working with for 4 or 5 months, and the wife was ill and dying of cancer, and then the husband had to do a guardianship for a child they had, and we're just finishing up the adoption process, and the wife died, and he says to us all the time, the minute he comes into some money, we're the first place he's coming to.
So now you could talk about your other asset.
Well, our other assets are certainly we have some board members. Term limits haven't really kicked in with our organization because we've had some board members who have been on for 30 years, and which is just extraordinary.
Right.
That the history, and it's just amazing that people have been that committed for that long. They're just starting to rotate out a little bit. I think they're happy with the direction the organization is going, and they know there's some other leadership. So I think they're feeling a little bit of they can lighten their load a little bit. So that's been great to thank them and let them transition. But we have a really new management team that I'm incredibly proud of, and they're a really amazing group of people, and they're a really big asset for us. We have a food pantry manager whose mom and dad almost started this pantry.
Wow.
and they both have passed, and so when Maureen's mom was passing, I was able to say to her, do you want this to continue as your family legacy, and should we bring Maureen on? And we did that right before she died, which was really an amazing thing to do for this family and this daughter. And Donald Martin runs our thrift store, and he's just doing an incredible job. And then we brought on a social worker, Kate Ford, who's our family service program manager. And it's a group of people that know how to get the job done no matter what it takes, with a heart that is really kind of amazing. So building this new team, that's been a real joy for me.
Oh, that sounds great. How large is your budget?
A little under $500,000.
Okay. You had mentioned that you were really impressed with the thrift shop at the beginning. So talk to us a little bit about that and why that kind of sticks out as a great program of yours.
Well, I think what I've been really looking at, and we together as a team have been looking at, is sort of the downfall of nonprofits relying solely on grant money. So my experience in the nonprofit world has been, you get a grant for 2 or 3 years, you get a project up and running, you get the community involved in needing the service, and then the funding's gone. And it's some way you're supposed to figure out how you create that money coming into the agency, which is always really a hard thing to do. And a lot of agencies close, or a lot of programs end because of that. So the thrift store model, the social entrepreneur model, gives us a funding stream that is constant, that we've just expanded to a second floor, and hoping the revenue will increase because of that. We have a new committee formed to look at, is there a second business, a for-profit business that we could start? I just love that model for a nonprofit too. And it has so many other benefits too. Then you're, doing job training, and you're bringing clients in. So we're looking at that. We're just going to start that conversation.
Without going into a lot of details, so how much revenue does the thrift shop generate?
It really varies seasonally. So for the summer, we're looking at. I'm not going to give you specific numbers because I just don't keep that in my head really well. But our funding comes from private donors, the thrift store. Those are the two main ways that we're getting money.
Okay.
And we're going to do some fundraising for the first time this year, which the organization's never done their own fundraisers. People in the community have done fundraisers on our behalf, which has been great.
Wow. So you're getting into the elevator, and inside, the door's just about to close, and Maine's most significant philanthropist shows up in the elevator. You're going to floor 5. This person's going to floor 1. The door closes. You have 15 seconds. Why should this person contribute to York Community Services Association?
My elevator speech you're looking for?
You're down to 10 seconds.
Okay. Your community service is providing a service for people who are really in need, and there's no other place for them to go. And we're making a significant difference in people's lives, and that's worth supporting.
Okay. And if someone wants to contact you?
They can call me directly, 207-650-8704, or our P.O. Box is Box 180, York, Maine 03902.
And you do have a very nice website they can
We
go
do
to.
have a website also, ycsame.org.
Well, great. Do you have any questions for me? I've been asking all the questions.
What are you trying to do about with this radio program in supporting nonprofits? What's your goal?
The goal for me would be the more people know about it when fundraising does happen, people hopefully would understand what some of the issues are that nonprofits are looking at. And they become a little more generous for the first time, or continue the generosity.
We had somebody ask, we did a board retreat, and they asked, when was the first time you ever gave in your life? And it was about supporting board members to ask donors to participate. And one of our board members said when she was a little girl, her mom made mittens and hats. And she had a little girl in her class, she was like in 4th grade. And the little girl said to her, "You're so lucky you have gloves and mittens." And she took them off and gave them to her. And when she came home and told her mom, "Where are your gloves and mittens?" and the girl said, "I gave them." And her mom was like, "How could you?" And then she like totally flipped and went, "Oh, honey, what a lovely thing to do. I'll make you a new pair." And she the point was, when you ask somebody to support an organization, you're creating that memory for them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Michelle, for joining us today. Next week we have Barbara President of the Maine Philanthropic Center. I'm sorry, Barbara, I messed up your last name also. The music appears by courtesy of Mike Hubbard. You can find Mike's music on www.michaelhubbardmusic.com. You can check out Mike's website to see where he's playing this weekend. Thanks to Deb Danger, NPI's executive engineer. If you know of a nonprofit that should be on the show, please email me at npi@davidunger.net.
Great. Thank you, David.
Thank you.